Have a full understanding of your financial situation now and where it's going to be in the next 12 months, because I can tell you the first year of owning a home is unbelievably tough.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Property Chat with Lachy and Matt, powered by Realhub. I'm your host, Lachlan Macdonald, along with co-host Matt Farrugia. And Matt, today we wanted to talk about it's a topic that's, very often discussed in Australia, and it's first home buyers. Getting into the market, it's something which has appeared very tough for some time. So we wanted to just go through a little bit of advice for people looking to try and get into the market, how they can do that. So I guess to start, what are some of the things you find from a first home buyer perspective are the most difficult, the hardest obstacles to overcome?
I think the big thing about being a first home buyer is the whole process can be overwhelming. And maybe for a lot of first home buyers, what I see is that they're probably not getting the right advice from the right people. So, they might be just speaking with one particular person. It might be a family member, or a friend, or someone who's had a past experience doing it. But as we know, the real estate industry changes so quickly that in order to keep up with it and to be a competitive buyer, you need to put yourself in a position where you've got, I suppose, trusted advisors on your side. That can be a real estate agent who, you might not necessarily be buying through. It could be someone in that space. It could be a broker. I think if I had to look back at how I did it, obviously I bought my first home at 23, didn't, have the benefit of anyone wanting to go guarantor or anything along those lines, had to save the deposit myself, didn't even get to the full 20% because it's such a massive amount of money. I think we paid $650 for our house. The deposit on that's huge, it takes forever to save. And at 23, like most, wasn't earning massive money. So I think what we did differently that worked really well was obviously working in the industry, you got a bit of an insight to, the mistakes that other first home buyers maybe were making and just getting edged out every single time. And some of those things were trying to shop without finance. That was a big thing. We saw that all the time. The second thing was not knowing their market at all, not having done any research, not knowing what the average price would be. To give you some idea, somewhere like Terrigal, which is the centre point for the Central Coast, everyone wants to be there. It's the number one search suburb. They'd come there with expectation that 600 to 700 would buy them a 3-bedroom family home on a level block with an ocean view. So it's about aligning your expectations, knowing exactly what your money buys you in the suburb that you're looking in. If I was a first home buyer again today, some of the things I would be weighing up is have a full understanding of your financial situation now and where it's going to be in the next 12 months, because I can tell you the first year of owning a home is unbelievably tough. You've just spent your whole deposit. You've probably been a little bit accustomed to being a bit maybe a bit more comfortable with money and spending a little bit more here and there because you've worked hard and saved. So analyse what the next 12 months would look like, budget that, speak with mum, dad, brothers, sisters, family members, whatever, whoever owns a home. Find out everything there is to know about all of your expenses, land rates, water rates, insurance, the lot. Get all of that so that you can itemise it. That would be the first step for me. I think second would be then looking at the market where you think you would like to buy, understanding what that house price is like in that market. Then I would be going back and let's say it was affordable and the average house price was around that sort of 600 mark, but 600 for something that you felt comfortable buying, not 600 knowing that there is properties that come up in that market at 600, but it's once every blue moon and you're not going to hang out for that. I would go back then and speak with a broker, which we'll do a topic on because I think that's really important, why I suggest brokers over banks. But going back to a broker and saying, look, this is my financial situation now. Here's a rundown of my budget and where I forecast things being in 12 months. Can you just give me some insight? You don't have to be buying today to meet with a broker. It costs you nothing. So I would be saying, this is what I ideally would like to do. This is where I'd like to buy. This is where the average house price is. Can you run me through what my financial options might be? Getting yourself in a position where you might not be able to get, like my situation, I wasn't able to get pre-approval at the time. I just moved into a sales role. They don't lend quite easily to people who are supposed to be earning commission, especially in a real estate market, which at the time was going quite well, but very competitive in terms of getting listings. So what we'd ended up doing was we went, okay, great. We know what we can borrow. In order to borrow more, how much would we need? And she said, well, you're going to need an extra $40,000. So that next 12 months, we just saved and saved and saved, put ourselves in a position that we were $20,000 short of our deposit that we needed, but we had the option of signing another 12-month lease, which we added up to be $24,000. So we made the commitment, paid the lender's mortgage insurance. So I think from my point of view, they'd be a couple of key items that I'd be considering. From you, what would you be thinking?
Well, I like what you said in terms of being realistic about suburbs. I think that's really important for first home buyers. And the worst mistake you can make as a first home buyer is to pick a suburb that you really want to live in, as you said, and look for the one property a year that comes up in that suburb at that price. Because you're going to have every other first home buyer competing for it with you. And what it ends up happening is it will sell, because of the competition, for disproportionately more than what other properties are. So like, let's say, for example, that, you know, very rarely does a first home buyer property come up in a particular market. It sells for 100,000 over what it was expected to sell for. It's still in first home buyer territory, but then you look at how close it was to a better home in that area, and you go, ooh,
maybe that next step
we've
up.
actually really overpaid in order just to be in that area. So the best advice I can give is to be smart about what you want. And why do you want that area? Do you want that area because of the name? Do you want it because of the postcode? Because you're paying a lot of money for that postcode. Really nut it down what you want in a home. Is it, if it's to live in, then it should be an easy decision. If it's for investment, you might want a particular area because of particular facilities. You know that there's a new train station going in. You know that there's a new Westfield going in, something which is going to grow the area. But if you're looking for a home to live in, chances are there would be any number of suburbs in a radius that would have a similar lifestyle. You know, I mean, even something as much as going, okay, well, if we were to buy a home 2 suburbs across, we'll get far more for our money. We'll get as you said, a better quality of home, because that's one trap first home buyers can fall into. Unless you're in a trade or you're a little bit handy yourself, it will cost you a fortune in that first couple of years if you buy that worst house in the best suburb.
Yeah.
Great if you're in the trade, and we see that a lot, obviously, on the Central Coast especially. You know, guys will buy a property, you know, first home buyer, do it up themselves, awesome. But if you're not, and you don't have that option, you're so much better to go a couple of suburbs out or somewhere a little bit further away and buy a property that's in good condition.
If you're as handy as I am, you'll need another mortgage just to pay the tradespeople.
Yeah. So I think that is probably my best advice that I can give, is be, you know, realistic about where you're looking, but be smart about it. Actually make a list. Go through and go, what are our non-negotiables? What are our wants?
Yeah.
And if a home ticks your non-negotiables and it ticks some of your wants, amazing. But if you are feeling like really you're erring to that want side, and that this home is really only of interest because of wants, not needs, then you need to really be logical about it and try and take the emotion out and go, you know, could we be getting more as a first home buyer in another area? Because I think the holding cost and the transfer cost is really important for first home buyers. If you buy the wrong home first and then your family grows and you've got to sell that property within 2 years, chances of you getting your money back is very slim.
Especially in the market we're in at the moment.
Exactly, because you've got obviously all of your costs associated with selling it. As a first home buyer, you won't have had the stamp duty, but then you'll have the stamp duty on the next purchase.
Yeah.
You know, so
commission, marketing, everything else along those lines.
Yeah, so make sure it's the right home at the start.
Yeah. Do you think it's a conversation that we've had many times off air about buyers, maybe if you're a lifestyle person and it's really important to you that you live in, you know, the city of where it is that you're looking, that maybe you rent where you want to live and that you buy where you can afford?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that whole idea of rentvesting is a great strategy. As a first home buyer, you can look at properties in central West New South Wales, for example, or in Queensland, apartments in Queensland. Now, when you're renting the property out, you don't get the first home buyer concessions, of course, but it can really outweigh the benefits if you just say, oh, well, if I buy an investment, I don't get the first home buyer benefits, so I'm not going to buy. You're better to have been in the market. You know, you're better to have put your foot in the door. There's so many places where you could get a property for $300,000, $400,000. You know, that will rent for strong returns.
Yeah.
In a lot of these country towns, those properties are positively geared from the get-go. You know, even if you only have a small deposit, you're still not putting anything in other than maintenance.
Yeah.
So effectively what you can do is you can rent where you want to live for, let's say, that 10-year period. Over that 10 years, you've had someone else saving your deposit for you.
Yeah.
It's a really good strategy, but I think that people get too emotional about property. As a first home buyer, thinking that it has to be perfect the first time around. I'm sure you see that.
Always, yeah. And I think the other side of things is people who end up doing the Rentvest situation or heading in directions like that, investing's a little bit more of a consideration than people realise. You know, you have to work out whether you want something that's positively geared or negatively geared. You know, naturally it's not always a factor you can control, but in where the market is that you purchase, obviously that has a massive influence over that. I think that for some properties, we see it all the time, you know, like say our market, the rents are nowhere near the yield that you would expect for a really good investment. So they don't make a great investment for a positively geared return, but what they do offer is the potential for, you know, huge capital growth. So I think we see a lot of people invest in our area based on capital protection, you know, and hoping that they get the money down the track, where some people we know further up the coast, they're renting out multiple dwellings on a single block and getting, you know, $1,100 a week for something that it's not costing them anywhere near that. So it's really positively geared. So I think there's some of the things to consider, but I would say as a first home buyer, probably spot on. Know your market, get some advice around finances, know your costs, be realistic around where that is that you want to be, and do some homework around what home you need to live in, what your future is going to look like. Because as you said, if the family's getting bigger or getting smaller, pick that right property. And then I think the last one for me would be lining yourself up with a solicitor or conveyancer early, just so that you've got someone there who's going to be in your corner, giving you some legal advice, maybe getting some insight around what that means, what a contract looks like, and even speaking with an agent about the negotiation process. Because, you know, obviously we'll be covering off on a lot of that, and that's what we hope this podcast will do for you, is you're going to have the ability to come in and find out, you know, why you should use a broker, why you should use a conveyancer or a solicitor. Then again, talking about what a cooling off period is, what an unconditional sale is, all of those sorts of things. So we look forward to getting through that process at some point. But if there is questions on that, obviously you can reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer those.
I think one of the final things for me is to get creative too. I mean, you hear some great stories of first home buyers where, for example, one guy will go out and buy a property and rent it back to all his mates at uni. You know, like incredibly smart. You know, things like that. Or if you, are lucky enough to have strong ties with your family, go and buy a place with your brother or your sister. You know, those sorts of ideas. And when people try and get creative about how can we get our foot in the door, I think that's the best sort of advice that we can really give, is think about, is there a way that somehow, I know it's tough, I know it's hard to get that deposit, I know all the sort of odds are stacked against you, but there's always a way to get to where you want to be, but you just might have to be creative about it. You might have to take 7 steps to get there.
Yeah, 100%. I think for a lot of people, it's as well trying to get the understanding that real estate has changed. Prices have gone up in the areas in which everyone wants to live, but there are still affordable options out there in different areas, but maybe just reassessing your situation and, you know, as you said, looking at Rentvesting or all those sorts of things.
And I think it's funny too that a lot of first home buyers will say, you know, in our generation, it's impossible. We can't do it. It's just so different. But in terms of stepping up, like I just said, if you actually ask your grandparents what they did, chances are most of them bought a very, you know, rundown property for the absolute, you know, most they could afford. They lived in it and struggled by. They did without a lot. Then they bought another one, and then they and then it was a little bit better, and then they stepped from that one up to another one. The home that they're living in today is a product of that stepping over time. And I don't think that as a first home buyer, it's realistic to think that you could jump in at the pointy end of the market and get, you know, the apartment of your dreams in the city of your dreams. You might have
similar to the property you've lived in for your whole life.
Exactly. You know, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. And if you ask, the point I'm making is, ask people who've done it. Yes, things are different. Yes, prices are different. But I tell you what, wages were different as well. You know, you look at the growth in Australian wages, even over the last 15 years, okay, property has surpassed it significantly, of course, but you can look at every factor and say it was different, this was different, that was different. Interest rates,
19% at one point.
Yeah, there's so many factors that you can say make it different. But the reality is every market is going to be different, and everything's going to based on the time in which you're in. You just have to find the ways that you can use, the things you can use to your advantage at the moment. And then there are strategies you can use to get in the market if you're clever. Yeah,
exactly. And I think even the other side of it might be for a lot of people who I know, similar to myself, that are renting at the moment. I know a lot of people are paying really big rents, and it makes it impossible to save. So maybe it's about reassessing that as well. Do you really need to be living where you're living and paying the rent that you're paying? If it's comfortable and it's a lifestyle that you're accustomed to and you like it, and that's what you want to do, then go for it. But I think in order to save money, you know, you have to make some sacrifices. We were living underneath someone's house, you know, in a 2-bed flat, paying $400 a week because it was affordable.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Yep, 100%. Well, guys, that wraps up this one. Thanks again for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.